Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us. I'm Julie Lammers, Senior Vice President of Advocacy and Corporate Social Responsibility for American Student Assistance, and I am excited to be here with Susan from Jobs for the Future to have this discussion, one in a series of discussions we're having about the importance of a diverse post-secondary education pathways. So Susan, I'll kick it off to you.
Thank you, Julie. Hi, I'm Dr. Susan Acevedo-Moyer at Jobs for the Future, also known as JFF. For those of you who might not know, JFF's North Star is that in 10 years, 75 million people facing systemic barriers will work in quality jobs. It's all about fundamentally transforming outdated systems of education and workforce development so that they're designed for equity, which were previously designed for that weren't previously designed for the man of our modern economy. JF does this by redesigning solutions and strategies, by working with policymakers, funders, and innovative practitioners. And we scale those solutions through our networks and by partnering with amazing folks like ASA. Thanks for having me today, Julie.
At ASA, we are focusing on ensuring that young people, as early as middle school, have access to information to make informed decisions about post-secondary education pathways. We are a national nonprofit focused on changing policy and ensuring young people have access to opportunity so that they can navigate the best path forward for them. So for the last few years, we have been partnering with JFF on this effort, and we are excited to take further steps in helping young people understand what this landscape looks like for them. Susan, maybe we can start with an explanation of what we mean when we talk about education and career pathways.
Thanks, Julie. If we could go back to the original slide that shows education and career pathways, that'd be great. Thank you. When we talk about education and career pathways, the traditional K through 12 system has presented students with a singular route for success. What does that mean? That means that typically our teachers and our counselors are thinking that it's a linear road to better pathways. And what that means is that they're thinking the four-year degree might be the only way. However, Generation Z is depending and demanding on something different. They are more entrepreneurial in spirit, and they have many of them have families to support, and so they are looking for a better way and less feasible way than the traditional route of the four-year degree. Our current systems and our messaging do not support this reality. The escalating cost of colleges have amplified Gen Z's circumspection about this route and its return on investment. They're questioning it. While a bachelor's degree is generally correlated with higher wages over a lifetime, the one path system is failing significant number of students who never choose to go down that path. So we have to do better. Approximately 4 out of 10 overall do not finish college, and the number is even higher for Black students, with 6 out of 10 not completing degrees at all. It's irrational to continue pretending that shouting louder about bachelor's degrees as the only option for everyone will fix this issue. Instead, there's a growing urgency of different ways to structure education and career pathways. And what do these look like? They can be apprenticeships, they can be boot camps, they can be earn to learn, like apprenticeship programs, even dual enrollment and boot camps. And while they're often referred to as non degree options, this terminology is imperfect because many of these programs can sync and link to college credit and typically stack to higher credentials and degrees, which is ideal. Over to you, Jolie.
So over the last few years, ASA and JFF have gone down the path of trying to understand these pathways better and understand how young people can navigate this complex and ever-changing system. We started with understanding where employers' perceptions lie when it comes to non-degree pathways. And what we found was that the largest challenge that we're facing right now is that about 72% of employers agree that a degree is not a reliable signal of assessing the quality of a candidate. And about 81% of employers think that they should be hiring based on skills rather than degree. The challenge is, how do you assess those skills? How do you understand what skills a young person has? And 80% of employers are saying they just don't have the information they need on how to assess non-degree pathways and how they differ from one another, what types of skills and training a young person will have when they are entering their workforce with these types of credentials. And so the landscape is murky when it comes to employers. They want to be able to build a pipeline for themselves and their workforce that is adapting to their changing needs as an employer. They see the value in thinking differently about how post-secondary education is delivering on the types of skills that they're bringing into their workforce, and yet they're having a hard time assessing what some of these degrees might be. Largely because there are so many of them, largely because it's a new and a developing field. And the tried and true path that they know is a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree. So thinking differently about how they hire, thinking differently about how they assess candidates is a challenging change management issue for a lot of employers. And so we know a lot of work needs to be done there. We can go to the next slide. What we're knowing from Gen Z is that they are open to thinking differently about post-secondary education. Even before the pandemic and the really radical changes that we saw in perceptions around post-secondary education during that time, Gen Z was beginning to think differently about what they need for themselves, what they need for their long-term futures, what types of education beyond high school are necessary for them to be successful, and how they navigate those new and emerging fields. 65% of the students that we surveyed in our surveys, however, really felt that the risk of choosing the wrong path was holding them back from trying something new, that they were going to default to what they knew in 2 and 4 year degrees because it was tested. Like employers, it was the tried and true path that others had traveled in the past, and that they were unlikely and unwilling to take a risk for something that they were not clear on. Gen Z has said overwhelmingly, 74% of them, that they want to build skills that lead to good jobs. That's what their goal is when it comes to post-secondary education credentials. And they also believe quite strongly that high school systems are not doing an adequate job currently of helping young people understand these types of options, what options are available to them, and the diversity of post-secondary education that a young person might travel post high school. So there is a lot more information that needs to get to young people, either through counselors or through parents, to make sure that they have all of the resources available to them to make an informed choice about what comes next for them after high school. And that's simply not happening right now from the perspective of Gen Z. The research that ASA and JFF worked on over the last couple of years really came down to trying to figure out what are the next things that we as organizations and the field need to do in order to make this system a little bit easier for young people to navigate. I think one of the sort of key action steps that we found in this work, Susan, is that a lot more research is needed. We know that because these paths are new, continue to understand the quality of each path, how to value them in the education to career field is a sort of an unknown at the moment, and so a lot more needs to happen in order to ensure that we understand the quality of these programs. We want to make sure there are no dead ends for young people, and that we are sending them down a path that will lead to their best economic outcomes. And so we need to continuously evaluate and research these opportunities. The next action step that we really believe is important is the efforts that we're trying to undertake to change the narrative around these pathways. There's a lot of stigma still associated with not attending a 2 or 4 year degree. Because largely of the unknowns that I mentioned earlier about quality and effectiveness of programming, there's just a lot of sense of risk when it comes to these programs. And so by standing up and understanding what high quality programs look like, giving examples of where high quality programs do exist, we can begin to change the narrative around what young people are willing to do, the types of opportunities that are available to them, and de-risk this process a little bit for them. We also see quite clearly from the last research study that we did that a lot more needs to go into providing high quality resources for students, for families, for counselors, to make sure that they've got the information at their fingertips to help young people navigate this. As students rely heavily on their parents and on school counselors to understand the landscape of what's coming next after high school. Counselors and parents largely probably rely on their own personal experience with post-secondary education, whether it was a good experience or a bad experience. And so that colors how young people get their information. We want to make sure that counselors and parents have what they need in order to help support the decisions of young people. All of this work has to be done with a commitment to equity and to figuring out ways of really measuring and articulating the quality of these programs. Doing that, we think one of the underlying things that needs to happen is changes in policy and funding in order to support the diversity of post-secondary education pathways going forward. And that could look like things like expanding Pell to short-term programs, what we're calling workforce Pell these days, or other policy levers to encourage and change employer hiring practices. Things like how are we ensuring skills-based hiring is something that states and employers are doing. There are a number of policy issues that can be undertaken to begin to shift our thinking and our way of practice when it comes to helping young people navigate these diverse paths. So if we can go to the next slide, I think one of the goals with the work that JFF and ASA have jointly undertaken is to really think about how do we provide long-term impact for young people? How will we ensure that young people are able to enter the job market sooner while continuing their learning? How will employers value the mastery of in-demand skills as much as college and credentials? Have we established new systems that will enable us to begin to close the racial wealth gap and economic disparities because fewer young people face the need for significant student debt? And from a national and regional economies perspective, will they be more inclusive and grow increasingly nimble, making them better able to adapt and respond to technological advances and other shifts in the workforce? Those are the long-term goals. I think we are looking now, and those are lofty goals, we're looking now at the incremental steps that we can take when we're thinking about hiring practices, training young people for the next steps to begin along this journey. You can go to the next slide. One of the things that we have thought quite a bit about is what the policy landscape looks like in this ever-changing landscape. And so we did ask policymakers directly about their perceptions about these non-degree paths and how we can help understand where their perspectives are, where there is opportunity for shift, what we saw across the board, is that there is really strong bipartisan support for these types of pathways. The majority of the individuals we surveyed in our DC Insiders survey agreed that these were options that could provide the skills to meet employer needs, that they would like to see action on supporting legislative changes to support these pathways. About 78% of them said they wanted to see boosts in federal funding for these types of pathways, and that there is a widespread agreement that hiring based on skills over degrees is the appropriate approach going forward. About 96% of Republicans and 91% of Democrats agreed that employers should hire based on skills over degrees. So there is openness and an understanding that a shift needs to be made. How we tactically do that is a bigger question, and a question that our next speakers will talk to about how we think about that policy landscape, what is possible in the coming years, and how we are pushing that forward.
Thanks, Julie. So now one of the things we want to do within this webinar is we want to launch into action, right? So there's a few tools and resources that we want to share now in answer to this research, right? In answer to some of these long-term impacts that Julie just spoke about. So we're going to turn it over to our policy team, who's going to speak about ways that JFF and ASA are launching into action.
Great. Thank you so much, Susan and Julie. Hi, everyone. My name is Erica Cuevas. I'm a director at JFF, and I work on our policy and advocacy team. They did a great job teeing up this next portion, which will dive a little bit deeper into policy, particularly at the federal level. ASA and JFF recently teamed up to put together a policy brief specifically looking at the Federal Higher Education Act and calling on Congress to update the Higher Education Act to meet today's workforce and the needs of today's students. And so on the screen, you'll see a QR code to get access to the full policy brief. We'll drop a link into the chat as well. But just for folks who are newer to this space, if we think about the Higher Education Act at a very high level, what that act does is it helps regulate federal financial aid for post-secondary to ensure that students and families are able to afford post-secondary education. The act also provides resources to institutions of higher education so that they can put together a broad array of programming at the post-secondary level. Unfortunately, Congress has not updated the Federal Higher Education Act since 2008. That was almost 2 decades ago. And we know that today's world, today's economy, workforce, today's students, and the higher education landscape generally, and the post-secondary landscape generally, is a lot different than it was in 2008. So this law is way overdue for updating, and we really dig into within this policy brief on various ways that Congress can strengthen the connection between K-12, post-secondary, and the workforce. So if we go to the next slide, I'm just going to briefly preview some of the recommendations that we do touch on in the brief. And this is just a subset. Please go to the fuller paper to get a download of even more ideas. But essentially, one thing we call for is allowing Pell Grants to cover the cost of high quality short-term training programs. That's something you heard a bit about earlier. The next bullet here is around creating incentives and sustainable funding to expand dual enrollment programs. Dual enrollment has significantly increased across the country. States, many of them are tapped out on what they can invest in these programs, and they are very successful. So the federal government, we're really calling on them to jump in and provide even more robust funding for dual enrollment. The third bullet here is around improving our federal post-secondary data systems to ensure that students and families are able to get the information and the data that they need about quality post-secondary pathway opportunities, what those opportunities lead to. That way folks can make the best decision for them in deciding what career path they want to go on and what programs they want to access. The fourth bullet is around improving the federal work study program at the higher ed level to ensure, one, there's equitable access to federal work study, and two, that those positions are closely connected to young people's career interests. So further connecting education to careers. And this last bullet is around providing funding to increase institutions of higher education's capacity to engage employers and incentivize public-private partnerships. So this can look in a variety of different ways. For example, higher ed institutions can work with employers to expand work-based learning opportunities for young people, to coordinate post-secondary curricula to meet industry needs, and even to expand and develop new apprenticeship programs in different career fields. So a lot can happen in this space, and we're calling on Congress to further that connection between post-secondary and workforce needs. So with that, I'm going to invite one of our experts to come on stage and join me in a quick policy discussion. Her name is Brittany Matthews. She's the Director of Policy and Advocacy at the Center for Higher Education Policy and Practice. She has robust experience previously working on Capitol Hill. And so, Brittany, welcome, and thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Very excited to be part of this great conversation.
So, Brittany, I'm just curious to get initially your perspective on, based on your experience on Capitol Hill and your current role, what have been some of the prior and more recent federal policy discussions around updating and modernizing the Higher Education Act?
Yeah, so just to start, I mean, as you were just talking about, as post-secondary learners shift farther away from who the traditional higher education system was built to serve, it's so important that our federal laws that govern those systems shift to meet their needs, and why this conversation is so important. So to answer your question, I think lawmakers on both sides of the aisle understand that young people are pursuing higher education largely to broaden their career opportunities when they do. And there's also clear data that the higher education systems that are most successful are most aligned with career outcomes. So improving post-secondary outcomes overall is certainly a bipartisan policy priority. Members of Congress are also beginning to really understand that learners are taking more non-linear, longer paths and moving in and out of higher education throughout their careers. And then to embrace these shifts and support all learners, higher education really needs to be able to measure learning and recognize experience and skills that are gained outside of college. So that part of this is really looking at recognized credentials and how those recognized credentials can serve learners throughout their lives, and how then they can be used to apply to degree pathways later on, if that is what makes sense for a learner, and that fits with their career trajectory. So making sure that there are exit on and off ramps for higher education throughout learners' careers. So as higher education looks at doing this, it really is constrained by Title IV financial aid, as you mentioned, with just how Title IV is typically given out based on how many hours a student is in their seat time and their clock hours versus their student learning. So there really need to be some fundamental changes to how we do this. So really looking at how do we measure credit for prior learning and make sure that that is applicable to a student's degree path. And then also looking at creating mechanisms for higher education to test and learn different ways to do this well, that doesn't bring a lot of risk to students and allows some more flexible options to be tested so they can be scaled for future learners. And there's so many different things we could talk about here, and we only have a few minutes, but I think that's really fundamental.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we could unpack so much of that, but just to continue to move forward and recognizing the previous slide on the bipartisan momentum, just quickly, we know that nothing can happen in DC without bipartisanship. And so can you just quickly talk about where there has been some bipartisan momentum around this higher ed multiple pathways space?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the good news is that a lot of the priorities you outlined earlier actually have bills that have been introduced this Congress that are bipartisan. So you have the College Transparency Act, which would bolster higher education data systems. And we know why that is so important, and to drive different shifts in higher education to align with career outcomes overall. We have the Empowering Learners Through Competency-Based Education Act, and this would create a demonstration project to allow for flexible disbursement of student aid based on learning progression instead of seat time. The Innovation Zones Act would update the experimental site authority so it better meets the needs of today's learners, and would collect better data than had previously been happening under the experimental sites. The Fast Track to and Through College Act would bolster dual enrollment. And then obviously short-term Pell, there are a number of proposals introduced. This receives an outsized amount of attention compared to the other bills we just talked about, but it also very well could move outside of a higher ed reauthorization context, which is very rare at this moment. So we will see what happens with all of that.
Great. And then one last question for you, Brittany, before we have to move to the next section is recognizing that HEA reauthorization may not happen quite just yet. There's likely still more time needed. But what can the field do now and in the near term to help support multiple pathways in higher ed and have greater connection to careers? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's such an important question because considering the delay, we don't know. So we have to start moving the field forward. So I think higher education really needs to ask who the current system is serving, with a growing number, 40 million and growing number of learners with some college and no credential, it's clear that a lot of learners are not being served by our traditional system. And when we look at our overall learners, 64% are working, 24% are parents, 3 out of 5 experience food or housing insecurity. And then we think about even that traditional learner that is that 18-year-old recent high school graduate is more likely to be working and to be financially independent from their parents. So these learners need systems that work for them. And there are some things that institutions can do to be meeting their needs better outside of a congressional support or change to federal law. Would be making their programs more flexible, offering different types of modalities, considering asynchronous and online and hybrid options, bolstering career alignment, which obviously we've talked a lot about is so important, increasing overall student advising and basic needs supports, building out robust credit transfer and recognizing more learners credit for prior learning. So we are recognizing what they're having in their career and from the workforce and bringing that to bear in the higher education context. And then without these changes, higher ed is really asking a lot of learners to take on risk when they enroll in schools that aren't meeting their needs. So we need to think about the some college, no credential population that's more likely to default on their student loan, more likely to be unemployed, more likely to be underemployed. So unless we are able to make some of these fundamental changes, that's just going to be a growing disconnect that is so important to address while we continue to wait for Congress to act on the Higher Education Act.
Yes, exactly. Great. Thank you so much, Brittany, for joining us in today's discussion, and to be continued, a lot more to dig into on the policy end.
Absolutely.
Next slide, please. I'm just going to close out this section by noting that JFF's policy team just launched a new overarching policy campaign called No Dead Ends. It certainly touches on post-secondary policy issues, but also includes a wide variety of other policy issues as well. It's focused on eliminating dead ends at school, at work, and in life. We have the QR code here, but we'll drop a link into the chat for our 2-pager on no dead ends. So we want folks to be joining us and really advocating to our policymakers on much needed policy changes. Next slide. And then here's just overarching our 4 policy pillars for no dead ends. They certainly echo a lot of what we've already been talking about in terms of empowering people with data and guidance, recognizing everyone's skills and learning, no matter where it was obtained, blurring the lines between work and learning systems, and helping people advance during tough times. So more to come there. Next, I'm now going to transition it to the next section and introduce my colleague, David Newsome. He's going to talk about the employer journey map. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you, Brittany. Hello, everybody. My name is David Newsome, he, him. I'm a director at JFF, and I'm going to speak about the important role that employers play in this movement. And as Susan said at the beginning, this is about moving towards action, and we're about to present on our journey map, which is a tool for employers on how they are taking these ideas about different pathways into opportunity and how they can act on that around a specific topic. If we go to the next slide, we know that yesterday's talent practices won't allow businesses to succeed. The COVID pandemic has shown us the need for rapid agility, the increasing attention that is given to the value and importance of having a diverse pool of candidates, a diverse workforce in order to have creativity, in order to be able to reach customers. And also the ups and downs of the economy have demonstrated that businesses need to be financially prudent. And with all of these together, we notice that skills-based talent practices, next slide, please. You'll also hear these called skills-first talent practices, are a really critical strategic approach for employers to take to their how they approach their HR processes. And this directly relates to everything that has been discussed on this webinar so far. So from an employer standpoint, when we say skills-based or skills-first practices, what we mean is that the employers are looking at what capabilities and competencies an individual would need in order to succeed at their job and move up within an organization. And this is different from what often happens, where people look at years of experience or whether or not someone has a degree, a 4-year degree, or what they have a specific degree in or where they went to college. And this looks to recognize that people can acquire that knowledge and ability in many different ways. And by adopting a skills-based approach and understanding that people come to their capabilities in a variety of ways, employers can be prepared for whatever challenges come, and they can access a much wider and more diverse talent pool than was previously available to them. If we go to the next step, we know that this is not easy. This is a big change. And as we move from reliance on resumes, and if people went to college, we continued to speak with employers, large and small, and they raised a number of concerns and challenges. And within that, we ended up creating, with support from ASA and the Walmart Foundation, a skills first journey map for employers. And what this does is 4 things. It helps to make the business case for skills first talent practices so that you can, a business leader can explain to potentially reluctant stakeholders why it will be important to change talent practices and focus on skills. It has a module to assess the maturity of current skills-based practices to understand where you are in your own evolution towards becoming more skills first, skills based. And then it helps identify specific next steps. There are many first steps and many next steps companies can take. Sometimes it's a matter of just picking one and moving for it. And so this tool does that. And then it also assesses organizational readiness, because even when you do have a great idea, the perfect idea, the actual process of managing change, inspiring people to make adjustments to practices and policies and systems, and then keeping that going requires a lot of concerted effort. And we wanted to make sure that people knew that going in and were prepared to not just decide what they were going to change, but how they were going to do it. I encourage you to download the journey map. Here you'll see the components that are included within it. There are 7 maturity criteria here, including things about job requirements that are on posting, where you're recruiting from, how you interview and assess your candidates, what you do with your employees once they're onboarded, how they advance within the organization, and the overall culture within the organization. So there's an assessment for each of those and specific next steps for each of those. And then there are 4 readiness criteria, which are related to the overall vision for why you are doing skills first talent practices, how much organizational buy-in you have, particularly from senior leadership, if there's dedicated time and money for staff to focus on these changes, and then a specific implementation strategy to move forward. If we can pull the screen down, I'd love to invite Yvette Huertas up. We have been working closely for the last couple of months with Yvette as part of a cohort of companies in Georgia who are members of SHRM, the Society of Human Resource Managers. And we've been working with them to implement skills-based talent practices and have used the journey map as one of the initial tools to help them along this process. So Yvette's been doing some phenomenal work, and we wanted to hear from her. So Yvette, if you can introduce yourself and Cardinal Glass Industries, I'll have a couple of additional questions for you.
Sure. Thank you, David. Thank you for the shout outs and for all of the positive remarks. It has been a great program and a great partnership. My name is Yvette Huertas. I'm the Human Resources Manager at Cardinal Glass Industries, based out of our Buford, Georgia location. Cardinal Glass has led the industry in the development of residential glass for windows and doors since 1962. We have nearly 10,000 team members across 49 locations. And in essence, we provide a turnkey solution to window manufacturers.
Awesome. And can you explain your role within Cardinal Glass?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's more of a business partner. So we work hand in hand with our employees, with our management team, handle every aspect of human resources. What I am most passionate about is the learning and development of our colleagues and our partnerships that we have with our community and our employees. And I'm sure somewhere a little bit deeper into our conversation, we may be able to share a story or two of some of our successful employees. We take a lot of pride behind what they do and who we are as a company.
Great, thank you. We're talking about skills first talent practices. Why do they matter to you and to Cardinal Glass Industries?
Yeah, so for me, it's a personal matter. I, like many of my colleagues here and our employees, college and university coming out of high school wasn't in the cards. It was more about surviving, having an income than education. what we have found, and in partnership and in my time here with Cardinal, is that our organization really takes pride in every single one of our employees, no matter what the path is. We have found the opportunities to develop employees under the right leadership with the right tools and resources. We get to redefine what our path will be.
Fantastic. Thank you. We provided the journey map to you as well as our other SHRM partners a few months ago. Can you explain how you used it and what you learned from using it?
Sure. So we used the journey map, first time seeing it as we were going through the process, but we really used it as a tool to evaluate and vet what our strategies were around recruiting and engagement. Those were areas that we thought we were doing really well in, but we wanted to make sure that we didn't miss anything. And so it allowed us to really take a look back and say, okay, where do we need to focus? Are we truly that skills first organization that we say we are? And we were able to evaluate some of the specific areas, identify gaps, but also find areas that we did well in, and we took time to celebrate those equally.
What were some of the specific practices you wanted to invest more time and energy in?
So there were two specific areas that we identified using the journey map. One was, how do we diversify our candidate pool? We wanted to broaden our community partnerships. And the second one was really about educating our new and current leaders on implicit biases, things that could potentially influence the way that we hire, we promote, and we lead.
So we've been working together, and I'd love for you to be able to now share some of the success. So what are some of the things that you've done based on these lessons, and what outcomes have you seen?
So based on those gaps and what we identified going through the exercise and working with the map, we, in March, launched our first in-person unconscious bias training that included all of our leadership team and including future leaders that have been identified through our process. What was interesting, we got a lot of rave reviews coming out of that training. We're looking at how that could be rolled out for all of our team members and then potentially across all plants. But we also had a lot of aha moments while going through it. And so things that we sometimes aren't expecting. We also have successfully hired an external candidate to join one of our technical departments solely on their skills. And so we took a step back and reevaluated what our job descriptions were, spending time with our current employees, understanding what the need was. And so we are currently tracking his progress, as well as an internal employee that received a promotion that has transitioned from our production team over to our maintenance department.
That's really awesome to see it coming to life and seeing it change that individual's career opportunities. What's next on the horizon for Cardinal Glass Industries?
So Q3, we're scheduled to launch a revised Cardinal career development process. It's going to allow us to really focus on identifying the skills that are needed to get the job done and realign all of our job descriptions across the plant and make sure that we are truly hiring what is needed and not what we think. We have also continued to strengthen our partnerships. That was one of our priorities. So we will continue working with our current local and high schools programs, but we've also, thanks to JFF and our program and our process that we've been going through, we were able to establish partnerships with Hiring Our Heroes and Work for Warriors. So want to look into how do we help our veterans transitioning out of the service while identifying those skills that they have obtained during that time and how they would relate to our roles here.
Awesome. Well, it's amazing work that you've done and what's on next. I know we're almost at time, but if you have any final advice or recommendations you'd give to other business leaders interested in becoming more skills first.
Absolutely. I would say start with your people. Get to know your employees, truly understand what are the skills necessary to get the job done. Use that feedback to vet it against your job descriptions, and then get engagement from your management team as early on as possible. Talk about the quick wins. I'll tell you that going through this process, we found that skills first hires made us more agile. They allowed us to identify those gaps in the skills that we needed. We were ultimately able to increase our productivity and performance because our managers felt more confident that these employees were coming in and they were going to get the job done. And ultimately, we were more diverse, right? So with all the staffing shortages that everyone is seeing and everyone's experiencing, it's about how do we include more candidates into our candidate pool when we're recruiting versus excluding folks. So it's a win-win. We just have to play the role of bridging that between our employees, our skills, and the management team. But ultimately, I would encourage everyone to take on the challenge and use the map as your roadmap and as a tool to be successful and change the way that we think.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Yvette. Really appreciate this time.
Thank
Pull
you,
the
David.
next slide up. You just heard one example of success and how employers benefit from skills-based approaches. Here are some other statistics. It is good for more applications. It increases retention, leads to more predictive hiring. Skills-based hires are outperformers. It creates more diversity. So many business benefits for this work. But we are at time. Definitely reach out with any questions. But I'm now going to transition things over to Maud Abil to talk about the work of the Pathfinder Guide and Tool. Over to you, Maud.
Thank you so much, David. Welcome, everybody, this afternoon. So I'm going to sort of turn back the clock back to sort of a focus on our young people. And I think you heard a lot about how important education to career pathways can be, and all the number of students who, for college, is not necessarily the right pathway. So this is why I'm so excited to share the Pathfinder Guide and Checklist. And then I'm going to have a quick chat with Carrie Rhodes, the Chief Program Officer at Restore Education, to get her feedback on the tool. The Pathfinder Guide and Checklist is a tool designed to help youth pursue quality post-secondary training pathways using a simple but powerful checklist. The checklist helps the user move from thinking about jobs and careers to charting their own unique journeys with confidence. This work is not new for JFF. For decades, we've been focused on how to help young people make sense of the growing array of post-secondary options, including but beyond college. In 2016, JFF launched a framework entitled Best Bets to help students make stronger connections between their career or occupation of interest and a viable pathway to the labor market. What we called a best bet defined as a post-secondary program that is grounded in student career interests with strong retention rates and with evidence of high placement in jobs with career advancement potential. So based on some of the statistics we heard before, college may not be that best bet in terms of retention rates and evidence of high placement in jobs with career advancement potential. This Pathfinder Guide and Checklist builds off that foundation by also focusing on helping a young person find their best bet, or what we now call the best pathway, one that matches the passions, purpose, needs, and skills of learners. Very simply, this tool provides topics and questions to reflect upon when researching and selecting education to career pathways, aligned with these 4 key building blocks, which you see here on the screen. What, how, and when will I learn? When will I start working and earning in my field? How will I afford training? How might this program position me for career success? It's the powerful combination of all 4 of these that will ensure a best pathway. As the user moves through the checklist, and you can kind of see an example of the checklist on the right there, the prompts integrate the lenses of self, security, and society. We want young people to think through the self lens. What are you good at? What do you love? What do you want to learn? The society lens, what the world needs that connects to your career interests, and the security lens. What can you get paid to do that, that you can feel connected to and help you afford the lifestyle you want? So an important distinguishing element of this tool is that it does have 2 key prerequisites. A young person is ready to use this tool once they have selected a career area or occupation that they want to pursue. This could be a specific occupation such as graphic designer, or an industry area such as arts, audiovisual, technology, and communications. So one or the other, but having a career interest is essential. Second, they have identified at least one potential post-secondary program that seems like it could be a fit. It's that seems like this tool helps to address. By running the program through the checklist, we can eliminate any guesswork and enable young people to make thoughtful and informed choices about what will work for them. We even suggest, if possible, that the young person has identified a company or organization that is recruited from the program and has job opportunities that align, or has job opportunities that align with the program's focus. But as long as you have the first 2, a career interest and a post-secondary program that you think could be a good fit, then you're ready to go. The Pathfinder Guide and Checklist is intended for students, but can also be used with or by counselors, teachers, parents, and any other decision influencers to help their learners with their career journeys. I'm going to provide a very brief example, and then we'll get to talking to Carrie. So a young person has identified IT as the career cluster they want to pursue, but they'd like to get some work experience before deciding whether to make a long-term commitment, such as college. Plus, they need to start earning money as soon as possible. In a meeting with their high school counselor, the counselor tells the student about a certification program that other students have taken after graduating, and they now have jobs in the industry, including one who got hired at Prudential and another in the IT department of an arts nonprofit. This option sounds exciting and just the kind of thing that to explore as a potential best pathway by using the Pathfinder checklist. Together, the student and counselor walk through the checklist using the program's website to gather information aligned with the 4 building blocks. At first, it seems like a fit. No prerequisites required. It's an efficient, affordable option to a certification. However, it's all asynchronous and online with no learning community or individualized support. The student knows, especially since the pandemic, that type of learning environment sets them up for failure. The student is not ready to have all online courses. And while they might be ready for that kind of program in the future, at this beginning stage, they need some in-person learning, even if it's going to cost more and take longer. The student and the counselor have not wasted their time. They've gathered essential insight into what kind of program to avoid for now and decide to broaden their search to both other certification programs, but also boot camps and even associate degrees, looking for ones that prioritize paid internships. So this is an example of how the tool is used and then reused until the best pathway is identified. After walking through the checklist with the counselor, the student might feel ready to use it on their own. The Pathfinder tool includes suggested resources for identifying additional post-secondary programs, or may prefer to continue working with the counselor to assess another CERT program, boot camp, or associate's degree as mentioned. So that's just a quick example of how the Pathfinder checklist can work in real life. But I want to turn to Carrie and bring her on to sort of get her feedback and insights into how this tool can be used with students. But Carrie, please first take a moment to introduce yourself and your organization.
Absolutely. So we work at Restore Education, which is an adult education nonprofit that serves youth by helping them to get their GED or learn English and then go through short-term training in order to earn credentials or perhaps and go to college. And so we offer free college preparation and support as they are starting their journey.
Great. So I know you haven't had a lot of experience yet with the tool, but what excites you most about the Pathfinder tool?
I think what I'm really excited about is the fact that this Pathfinder tool has some self-discovery that's embedded within it, especially at the very beginning. I think sometimes it's important for a learner to take the time to reflect on themselves and really identify what excites them and what are some potential futures they can go for. And the ones that were included in that section up at the top are very interesting, visually stimulating, and I love how it aligns with ONET and Career One Stop. So this is something I see that could really seamlessly work with a lot of what organizations build their career preparation on. I think the other thing I'm so excited about is the fact that there's a lot of opportunity for the participants to be able to take charge of their path. So there's this part where they're like, I am not sure about something. And I think that that's something where the coach can come alongside and say, well, let's get sure. And there were some pieces about going on informational interviews. So this is something that I am extremely excited about. And then when we were going through the introduction to the tool, someone was showing how it could be bilingual, and it is developed in Spanish. And I'm very excited about that. So we are in San Antonio, Texas. And so oftentimes we're working with a population that is seeking to get their GED in Spanish. And so this allows us to serve them on their pathway.
Yes, thank you so much. Well, you got me even more excited about the tool, hearing how you are going to think about using it. So, I mean, can you imagine how you would approach a student or a decision influencer in their life, such as a family member, with this tool? It might seem a little daunting at first. How would you make this tool feel sort of useful and accessible to the folks that you work with?
I think that there's an element of tapping into their dreams that's very important. And when someone is able to do that, they are really tapping into their sense of purpose and their sense of belonging. And so that allows the participant to feel seen and appreciated. And I think that as we do that with them, that's really going to help break this down. And I think that you're right. It is about chunking this so that there are pieces that need to be done at the beginning of the journey. And then I loved in the example you used where let's break out this tool and let's refine it because what seems to be listed doesn't fit anymore. And I think that that's true about any plan that we come up with in life, right? And so modeling something like that with the participants gives them the skills to be able to eventually take ownership and then do their own editing.
Right, exactly. And just sort of the last question, I wish we had more time to talk, but I know that your organization has a certain curriculum that you use, I believe. I'm just wondering about how you would see sort of integrating this into either the curriculum or just as part of what a person coming to your organization receives as part of the services.
So this would be something that we would start in our orientation process. So it's like a student onboarding. And again, for us, I believe it's very important to connect with the participants and what they're hoping for in life, because then the educational journey is going to be that much more impactful. And by connecting to that bigger picture, it's going to drive them to see that, yes, these small steps all add up. But I also see that, especially for the people who are going through the college preparation, they go through Road Trip Nation and they do some work with that. And so it can definitely work seamlessly with Road Trip Nation as it's, again, that pathway and it's a physical tool that can be used.
I love that you brought up Road Trip Nation because I think that's the intent behind this tool is that it can be integrated with ONET, My Next Move, things like Road Trip Nation. So it's really something that you don't have to sort of stop using the other things that you already have and that you've already found to be successful, but it adds another layer and can kind of help connect some of the dots as you mentioned. So thanks for bringing that up. That's great. I do wish we had more time to talk, but I think it's my time now to turn it back over to Susan and Julie. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time.
Can we bring Julie back on the stage too, please? Hi, Julie. So that was a lot of information for our folks to hear at once. But what we wanted to do is introduce them to tools and resources that they can use now that are available today. And we know that these tools are not going to be the end all of solving all of our problems for education and career pathways. So what do we do next? What would you suggest and how would you have folks get involved?
So I think, first of all, taking a look at these tools after hearing from two practitioners that are using them quite effectively, and seeing if they work for your business, for your organization, sharing them with your friends, sharing them with young people that can think about how to navigate this field and provide us feedback. I think we understand that these are not perfect tools at the moment, and how can we continuously improve on this ever changing field. So we'd love to just get more use of the tools and information so that we can continue to improve and evolve on those. I think we'd also love to hear feedback from people that have questions about what is happening in this field, have really strong opinions or perspective on what has worked for them. I think when it goes to understanding the field better, continuously researching what is happening, because there is so much happening. We don't know what we don't know. And so continuous feedback, I think, is something that we are looking for as we're trying to make sure that people have the resources and tools they need to begin to make change in this way. Also, I would say if there is a tool that you think is necessary, that we can start to think about how we might build to make the process a little bit easier. There are two that we highlighted here today, but what else is needed to make sure that both employers have the support that they need in order to start down this path, and to ensure young people have the tools they need to make informed decisions. So I think those are a few things to think about as we're moving forward. Still a lot of work to be done. I think we understand we're at the early stages of this, but we're excited to see what comes next.
Speaking of those early stages, what do you think happens if we don't make the change necessary? How is it going to affect Gen Z coming behind our young people who are 12 years old and coming behind those folks now, and even our younger generation, if we don't start making a change towards this thought process that it's only one way to a successful economic mobility?
Yeah, I think we see one of the statistics that was shared earlier, right? Only 60% of young people are finishing a 2 and 4 year degree. So we are leaving a large portion of young people behind. And we know that employers do not have a solid pipeline for filling their open job requisitions. So we know that employers will continue to fall behind, that young people will continue to flounder, right, as they are trying to make decisions about what comes next and what's best for their long-term economic mobility. It's up to us, and it's sort of incumbent on us to make sure that young people have that information, that employers are embracing this new way of hiring, so that young people feel that it is a good path for them to try something new, to go in the direction of building skills that will be valuable in a workforce, in the same way that, for the last few generations, that people have worked towards getting a degree because they know it's valuable to employers. Changing that mindset of what employers really need and want is an important first step, and something we really need to continue to drive to make sure that young people can navigate to what works for them.
Thank you, Julie. Want to thank everybody who tuned into our webinar today. Remember, this is just a small sample of the tools and resources and collections that JFF and ASA together are partnering to bring to you. So if you want to see more of our research and dig into the tools that you saw today, please visit expandopportunity.org so you can see more of that. Also, please feel free to reach out to me. You see my email on the screen if you want to get involved, and how we can actually we can't do this alone. We need you to get involved, and do this together. And as Julie mentioned, we'd love to hear feedback on our tools and how they're working for you. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.